MBTA General Manager Phil Ing is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. He's tasked with fixing a broken system, from fires to trains and people jumping out of windows to falling debris at subway stations to infuriating slowdowns. What can we expect to get better? And when? The GM is here this morning. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News 35's political reporter, Sharmit Saketi. It's great to have you with us this morning. And with us this morning, as you can see, is Phil Ing. He was appointed by Governor Maura Healey as the MBTA's general manager back in April. He has some 40 years of transportation experience, including top jobs with New York's Metropolitan Transit Authority and the Long Island Railroad. Obviously voluminous, both of them. He holds an engineering degree from Cooper Union. The one thing on there that's not listed, he's a Mets fan, but that's okay. We'll welcome you to the table anyway. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for being here. Let's start with the FTA's rejection of the plan for worker safety. The deadline for a new worker safety plan for the T is actually tomorrow. Federal regulators wanted that plan after citing several near-miss incidents between trains and track workers like these two you can see on your screen in March. We learned about the new deadline days ago, but you've known about it actually for weeks. So tell us why you didn't tell the public about it or the MBTA board, and what is the status of the new plan?
Certainly, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. First and foremost, the right-of-way access, which is part of the plan that FTA is looking for, is utmost importance to us. And we've been working hand in hand with FTA and DPU, actually, to ensure that worker safety is a top priority. Because without our employees doing what they do day in and day out, we can't accomplish what we need to do. But with regards to that letter and the process, you know, I took that as this is a normal process with FTA. I've worked with many federal agencies in the course of my career, FHWA, FRA, FTA, and there's always this back and forth with regards to
So you didn't think it was important enough to mention at the board meeting?
Because I knew where we were with regards to what they were looking for. They're looking for more clarity on the short-term measures, which we have been very focused on. What we provided was those measures in a summary of also where we wanted to go longer term. So what they asked for really is just to resubmit it in a way that focuses on the next 60 days.
And what's the status of that now? Because it's
status
due tomorrow.
of that is all those schedules are in place. Some of those have been implemented. And what we're really doing is rewriting the response to just focus on those key points. The team has been working to make sure it's in the format that FTA is looking for, so they can better understand what has been done, what will be done in the near term, and we're confident that that will be submitted tomorrow. And working with FTA, confident that we expect a positive response.
What are you including to make sure FTA does indeed accept it? These steps that you're talking about?
Well, what caused this to happen was some of the near misses that were occurring, right? And that goes back to worker safety. And if we can't keep the workers safe, then we can't expect them to be working in the system, particularly when you have high voltage, when you have moving trains.
When you have a system that's as old as it is.
Yes, and at the same time, we have a tremendous amount of work to be done. But what we're doing is making sure that the procedures, the training that we have in place is enhanced to focus on those areas where there were some occurrences that resulted in near misses. That's how we also are better training dispatchers. We have more senior dispatchers in those in the operations center to assist on the more complex maneuvers to help the more junior dispatchers. Other things, training. On-site training as well as in-classroom training, things of that nature.
We're kind of talking about transparency anyway, but transparency is at the heart of a lot of this. Communication between the T and riders has been, at least here at News Center 5, as in the communications that we've had, that's been problematic. For example, on Marathon Day, riders were stranded on the Green Line for more than an hour when a train broke down. And from what we've heard, nobody told them there was a mechanical problem on the train, which led to the problem. Media communications can be difficult as well. I'm just going through a litany of things that we hear in the newsroom. So tell us how that will change.
Communication with the public is a priority. And I remember in my past role at Long Island Railroad, the same concern with the riders, right? They understand that things do happen. Obviously, we're working hard to make those far and few between. right, with regards to safety and reliability. But when they happen, we need to make sure we're giving them real-time information so they can make decisions. I think something that perhaps folks maybe saw, I think there was one Saturday where we had a power cable smoking condition. What we made sure is once we had folks on scene, we knew that was going to take 2 hours probably at best. And we made sure we put that information out. And that's what we want to do moving forward. Give them real-time information. No one wants to share necessarily when things don't go as well as planned. But it's important for people to know it's not a 5-minute issue. It might be a 20-minute issue or a 2-hour issue. And that's where the real-time information is, even with train schedules, right? When is the train arriving? Is it really arriving in 5 minutes? That is important because that goes to the frustrations.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have so much to get to. When are people going to notice that difference? The MBTA board chair, Tom Glynn, had said it's probably going to be about a year before people notice a big change on the T. But when will people notice a difference in, say, communications?
I think with the communications incidents, you'll see that. We've been doing that. When we had an issue on the Blue Line several weeks ago, with regards to Twitter and messaging, when an incident happens, yes, you will see that more immediately, right? When we're responding to an incident, I'm asking, when are the folks going to be there? When are our crews going to be there? What is their assessment? That information I'm asking for, we want to share that with the public, right? Again, if you get to the station and it's a 30-minute issue, I'd rather you knew before you got to the station that it's a 30-minute issue than to get there and then find out and not know.
So a few weeks ago, we had Governor Healy here on OTR, sitting in the hot seat where you are right now. And we did talk about this incident at Harvard Station when a utility box came crashing down on a rider who is now taking legal action against the T. It happened after another incident at the same station where a ceiling panel fell, narrowly missing a rider. The T said a full inspection had been done, but that utility box was missed. Here's what the governor said when we asked her about it.
I have questions about how it is that we have stations that are in this state of disrepair to begin with. I mean, what has been happening? Actually, the question is, look at what has not been happening for several years, it turns out. It's absolutely unacceptable.
I do want to start and ask you, how is that possible that that utility box was missed when inspectors were checking up on those ceiling tiles?
Well, the governor's 100% right. That was unacceptable, right? That's why at the last board meeting, one of the things I decided that we needed was a head of stations. And the reason for that, in the past agencies, I saw where a head of stations is a single point of accountability, right? Somebody who is managing a team. Obviously, we have many stations across the system, but that team will be there to support this person in terms of the environment of our stations, the safety of our stations, and to bring together all the different functional groups that support addressing those in a more timely manner, right? Because that's one of the things that I really believe we needed here. It also will allow the customers to have a point, as we build out the team, to have a point of each station, a contact, because that's also important. Right. Customer feedback is invaluable to us, and their feedback is something that is eyes and ears in everywhere we're going, and we need to make sure that's incorporated into our daily process.
But if you look at the system itself, many stations are in tough shape, and we just showed you what happened at the Harvard Station. Many stations are in tough shape, and the optics are just not good. So where does repairs to stations stand on your list of priorities?
I look at stations, and I've said this in my past roles, it's almost like my living room, right? If I'm inviting someone into my living room, I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to feel safe, and it has to be a welcoming environment, particularly if we want riders to come back. So that's one of the areas where we will focus on in terms of how do we change the dynamics of that. I mean, these are downtown, components that I think the businesses want to see the stations in this manner. Obviously, the larger scale projects for stations that need to be replaced or that, we have to put that into the program. But there's no reason we can't take care of some of these more immediate needs in terms of corrective repairs, cleanliness, and just giving that, again, inviting
no reason you can't take care of that, right?
Well, it's a matter of getting it scheduled. It's a matter of putting it in place, right? But I think, as the chair said, this is not something to snap the fingers and tomorrow everything is spick and span.
But head of stations, this is a new position, and it sounds like, and this is someone who is accountable to you over the condition of all these stations.
Absolutely.
All right.